I was standing in Senator Michael Harrison's private office when he turned from the window, smiled, and said, "Mrs. Brennan, my father always said you were the smartest woman in Washington." My daughter-in-law's face went white, not pale, white, like someone had drained every drop of blood. She grabbed the edge of his mahogany desk, knuckles sharp against the wood, and I watched her perfect career crumble right there in front of the Georgetown skyline. Just 3 hours earlier, she'd whispered in my ear at the holiday party downstairs, "Helen, do not embarrass me tonight. No politics, no opinions, just smile and stay quiet." I should have listened, but then again, some silences cost more than words ever could. Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching, whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in Australia, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France. I want to know. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. My name is Helen Brennan. I'm 71 years old, and for the last 6 years I've lived in the converted garage apartment behind my son's house in Silver Spring, Maryland. It's small, just a bedroom, bathroom, and kitchenette, but it has a window that catches morning light, and that's enough. After my husband died, my son David said, "Mom, you shouldn't be alone." What he meant was, "Mom, you can't afford to stay alone." I sold the house in Bethesda, the one with the blue shutters and the garden I tended for 30 years, and moved into their backyard. Not the main house, the garage. My daughter-in-law, Natalie, made that clear from the start. She stood in the driveway the day I arrived, arms crossed, watching the movers unload my furniture. "Helen, I want you to feel welcome," she said, voice smooth as glass, "but David and I need our space. The apartment has its own entrance. You won't need to come through the house." I nodded. I understood. Natalie works in politics, chief of staff to Senator Michael Harrison, Republican from Virginia. She's 38, sharp as a blade, always dressed like she's about to step into a camera frame. Navy suits, pearl earrings, hair pulled back so tight it looks painful. She didn't marry my son for love. She married him for stability. David's a good man, steady, works in IT, makes decent money, but he's quiet, forgettable. Natalie needed someone who wouldn't compete with her ambition, and David, bless him, was grateful someone like her even looked his way. For 6 years, I kept my head down. I babysat their daughter, Emma, after school. I folded laundry when Natalie was traveling. I made casseroles and left them in the fridge with reheating instructions. I didn't complain. I didn't ask for anything. I was useful, invisible, and quiet, just the way Natalie wanted. But I wasn't always this way. Before I was David's mother, before I was Natalie's burden, I was someone else. I worked in Washington for nearly 20 years, assistant to a deputy undersecretary at the State Department. It wasn't glamorous. I typed memos, scheduled meetings, kept files, but I was there. I sat in rooms where decisions were made. I knew names, faces, stories. I watched young staffers climb ladders and fall off them. I learned that power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just memory. Natalie doesn't know this. She never asked. To her, I'm just an old woman who needs help opening jars and remembering pill schedules. She talks around me, not to me. At family dinners, she discusses her work, Senator Harrison's committee hearings, his upcoming re-election campaign, the donors she's courting. She speaks quickly, using acronyms I'm supposed to be too old to understand. PACs, super PACs, OPO research. David nods along, proud. Emma, 12 years old, scrolls through her phone, and I sit there, chewing pot roast, invisible. Until last month, until the holiday party. Every December, Senator Harrison hosts a private gathering at his townhouse in Georgetown. Staff, donors, political allies. Natalie had been talking about it for weeks. "This is the event of the season," she said, pacing the kitchen while I stirred soup. "Harrison's deciding who moves up next year. I need to be flawless." She looked at me. "David's coming. I can't leave Emma home alone. You'll have to come too." I blinked. "Me?" "Yes, but Helen, listen carefully." She leaned against the counter, voice low. You cannot talk politics. You don't understand how these things work. Just smile. Be pleasant. If anyone asks, you're David's mother. That's it. Do you understand?" I nodded. I understood perfectly. The morning of the party, I stood in front of my closet. Most of my clothes are old: cardigans, elastic waist pants, sensible shoes. But in the back, wrapped in plastic, was a dress I hadn't worn in 15 years. Navy blue, knee-length, structured. I'd bought it from my husband's retirement dinner, back when we still hosted people, back when I still felt like myself. I slipped it on. It still fit. I found my pearls, the ones my mother gave me, and a pair of low heels. When I walked across the yard to the main house, Natalie was in the hallway fixing her lipstick in the mirror. She glanced at me, paused, then frowned. "You look nice," she said slowly, like it was a problem. "Thanks," I said. She turned back to the mirror. "Remember what I told you." I nodded again, but this time I didn't mean it. The townhouse in Georgetown was one of those places that whispers money without saying a word. Tall ceilings, crown molding, a chandelier that probably cost more than my entire retirement fund. Waiters in black ties moved through the rooms with trays of wine and tiny appetizers that looked like art. I stood near the fireplace, holding a glass of white wine I wasn't drinking, watching. David was somewhere in the crowd, talking to other staffers. Natalie was working the room, shaking hands, laughing, leaning in close to donors like they were old friends. She was good at this. I could see why Harrison kept her. I didn't recognize most of the guests: young faces, expensive suits, the kind of people who check their phones every 30 seconds, like the world might end if they miss a text. But then I saw him, Senator Michael Harrison. Tall, mid-50s, silver hair, that easy politician smile. He was standing near the window talking to a man in a gray suit. And suddenly, I was 28 years old again, sitting in a cramped office on E Street, answering phones for Undersecretary James Harrison, Michael's father. The memories came back sharp. James Harrison had been brilliant, tough, principled, one of those old-school diplomats who believed in service over spectacle. I'd worked for him for 6 years, longer than any of his other assistants. He trusted me. When his wife was sick, I rearranged his schedule so he could sit with her. When his son Michael was struggling in college, James asked me to help proofread his applications. I'd met Michael twice, maybe 3 times. He'd been young then, uncertain, still figuring out who he was. Now, he was a senator, and I was standing in his house, invisible. Natalie swept past me, voice low. "You okay?" "Fine," I said. She looked relieved. "Good. Stay here. Don't wander." She disappeared into the crowd. I stayed by the fireplace, watching Michael talk, watching Natalie work. I wasn't planning to say anything, I really wasn't. But then someone bumped into me, a young man, early 20s, juggling a wine glass and a phone. He stumbled, wine sloshing, and I caught his elbow. "Careful," I said. He looked at me, startled, then smiled. "Sorry, thanks." He glanced at my dress, my pearls. "You work on the Hill?" "Not anymore." "Who'd you work for?" I hesitated. "James Harrison, long time ago." His eyes widened. "No way! The James Harrison, State Department?" "Yes." "That's wild. He's a legend. My professor at Georgetown talks about him constantly." "He was a good man," I said softly. The young man grinned. "You should tell the senator. He loves hearing stories about his dad." "I don't think—" "Seriously, he's right over there. Come on." Before I could stop him, he was walking toward the window, toward Michael Harrison, waving me forward. My heart pounded. I glanced across the room. Natalie was deep in conversation, her back to me. I could turn around, walk away, stay quiet, but something in me, some stubborn, forgotten part, followed him. The young man tapped Michael's shoulder. "Senator, sorry to interrupt. This woman worked for your father." Michael turned, eyebrows raised. He looked at me, polite but blank. Is that right? I nodded. A long time ago, I was his assistant. His expression shifted. Curiosity, maybe. Recognition. What's your name? Helen Brennan. He stared at me. Then his face broke into a smile, warm and genuine. Helen Brennan! My God! Helen! He stepped forward, hand extended. I remember you. You helped me with my college essays. You saved my life. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. And before we continue, drop a comment and please subscribe to Whispers of Grandma. And let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Stories like this deserve to be heard. Now let's get back to the story. The room tilted. I shook his hand, feeling the warmth of his grip, the weight of being seen. I didn't do much, I said. Are you kidding? I was failing English. You spent hours on those applications. My dad talked about you constantly, said you were the smartest woman in Washington. I laughed, embarrassed. He was generous. No, Michael said firmly. He was right. He glanced around, lowered his voice. Are you still in the area? What brings you here tonight? I opened my mouth, and that's when I heard her. Senator. Natalie's voice sharp as a whip crack. She was beside me suddenly, smile frozen, eyes burning. I see you've met my mother-in-law. Michael looked between us. Helen's your mother-in-law? Yes. Natalie's hand landed on my shoulder, gripped tight. She lives with us. I brought her along tonight. That's wonderful, Michael said, smiling. Helen, you should have told me you were connected to my staff. She's very modest, doesn't like to talk about the past. Michael nodded slowly. Well, I'd love to catch up properly. Helen, would you join me upstairs for a few minutes? I have some old photos of my father. I'd love your perspective. Natalie's nails dug into my shoulder. Oh, Senator, I'm sure Helen's tired. I'm fine, I said. I looked at her. I'd be happy to. Natalie's smile didn't move, but her eyes said everything. We followed Michael through the crowd, up a narrow staircase into his private office. The door closed behind us, and I knew right then that my quiet life was over. The office was smaller than I expected. Bookshelves lined one wall, packed with biographies and policy reports. A desk sat near the window, papers stacked neatly. A framed photo of Michael with his father, James in his 60s, silver-haired, smiling that careful diplomat smile. Michael gestured to a leather chair. Please, sit. I sat. Natalie hovered near the door, arms crossed, jaw tight. Michael didn't seem to notice. He pulled a box from the bottom shelf, set it on the desk, and opened it carefully. Inside were old photos, letters, newspaper clippings, pieces of his father's career. I've been going through these, he said, voice soft, trying to remember who he was before politics consumed everything. He lifted a photo, black and white, James at his desk, surrounded by staffers. I recognized the office, E Street, 1982. That's you, Michael said, pointing to a young woman in the background, dark hair pulled back, holding a file. I leaned forward. It was me, younger, sharper, alive in a way I'd forgotten. I'd forgotten what I looked like, I whispered. Michael smiled. My father always said you kept him sane. He trusted you more than anyone. I glanced at Natalie. She was staring at the photo like it was evidence of a crime. Michael kept talking, pulling out more photos, asking questions. Do you remember the summit in Geneva? The trade negotiations with Japan? What was he like during the crisis in '84? I answered carefully, honestly. I told him about James's habit of pacing while dictating memos, how he drank terrible coffee and refused to switch to tea, how he hated fundraising but loved policy, how he cried the night his wife died, alone in his office, door closed, and I sat outside until he stopped. Michael listened, not like a politician, like a son. When I finished, he was quiet. Then he said, "You knew him better than I did." I shook my head. "You were his son. That's different." "Maybe." He looked at Natalie. "You're lucky to have her working for you." Natalie's smile was ice. "Helen doesn't work for me, Senator. She lives with us. She's retired." "Right," said Michael slowly. He turned back to me. "Helen, I'd love to stay in touch. Maybe you could consult on my father's archives. We're planning a memorial foundation. Your memory would be invaluable." Natalie stepped forward. "Senator, that's very generous, but Helen has health issues." "I'm fine," I said. Michael raised an eyebrow. "Then it's settled. I'll have my office reach out." Natalie's jaw clenched. She nodded, tight and furious. We left the office in silence. Downstairs, the party was still going. David found us, smiling, oblivious. "How'd it go?" Natalie didn't answer. I said, "It was nice." We left early. The car ride home was silent. When we pulled into the driveway, Natalie finally spoke. "What the hell was that?" I didn't answer. She slammed the car door. "You embarrassed me, Helen. You made me look incompetent, like I didn't even know who you were." "You didn't ask," I said quietly. She stared at me. "You don't understand how this works. This is my career. You don't get to waltz in and—" "I didn't waltz," I said. "He recognized me. I was polite. You were showing off." I looked at her. "No, Natalie, I was just myself. Maybe that's what scared you." She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and walked into the house. David followed, glancing back at me, confused. I stood in the yard, keys in hand, staring at the garage apartment. For the first time in 6 years, I didn't feel small. The next morning, I woke to knocking, hard, sharp, insistent. I pulled on a robe and opened the door. Natalie stood there, dressed for work, coffee in hand, face calm but eyes still burning. "We need to talk," she said. I stepped aside. She walked in, glanced around my small space, the neatly made bed, the books stacked on the side table, the photo of my husband on the dresser. She set her coffee on the counter. "Helen, I've been thinking about last night." "Okay." I overreacted. I was stressed. The party was important, and I wasn't expecting you to connect with the senator like that. I waited. She took a breath. "But you have to understand, my position is delicate. Harrison trusts me because I'm competent, organized, and discreet. When you start inserting yourself into his world, it complicates things." "I didn't insert myself," I said calmly. "He asked me questions. I answered." "I know, but it changes the dynamic. He sees you as someone with history, with credibility, and that makes me look like I didn't do my homework." I almost laughed. "You think this is about you looking bad? Isn't it?" I stared at her. "Natalie, for 6 years I've lived in your backyard. I've babysat Emma, cooked your dinners, folded your laundry. I've sat at your table while you talked about your work like I wasn't even there, and I never complained. But now, because someone finally remembered I exist, you're angry?" Her face hardened. "That's not fair. Neither is erasing me." The silence stretched. Then she said, voice low, "If Harrison asks you to consult, you'll say no." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "You'll say you're too old, too tired, not interested. You'll decline politely. Do you understand?" I felt something cold settle in my chest. "And if I don't?" She smiled, thin and sharp. "Then maybe it's time we reconsider living arrangements. David and I have been talking. Emma's getting older, needs more space. The garage could be converted into a studio for her. We'd help you find a nice senior community, somewhere affordable." I stared at her. "You'd kick me out?" "I'd help you transition," she corrected, "for everyone's benefit." I nodded slowly. "I see." She picked up her coffee. "I'm glad we understand each other." She left. The door clicked shut. I stood there, hands shaking, breath shallow. Then I walked to the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 15 years. When a man's voice answered, I said, "Tom, it's Helen Brennan. I need a favor." Tom Riley had been James Harrison's deputy. We'd worked together for years, kept in touch after I left Washington. He'd retired to Annapolis, lived quietly, but he still had connections. "Helen," he said, surprised, "it's been ages. What's going on?" I told him everything, the party, Michael, Natalie's threat. When I finished, he was quiet. Then he said, "You want me to make some calls. I want to know if Michael Harrison's office is hiring consultants for his father's foundation, and if so, I want my name on the list." Tom laughed. "Helen Brennan, I knew you were still in there somewhere. Can you do it?" "Consider it done." I hung up. My hands weren't shaking anymore. That afternoon, Natalie called from the office. "Helen, I just got an email from Harrison's team. They're formalizing the foundation project. They want to interview potential consultants." She paused. "Did you say something to him?" "No," I said honestly.
"Good, because I told them you weren't interested." I smiled into the phone. "That's fine, Natalie. I'll tell them myself." I hung up before she could respond. 2 days later, Michael Harrison's office called. They wanted to meet. I said yes. The meeting was in a conference room in the Russell Senate office building. I hadn't been inside in 20 years. The halls smelled the same: coffee, paper, the faint metallic scent of power. I wore the navy dress again, pearls, low heels. I walked slowly, but I didn't feel old. I felt awake. Michael was already there, sitting at a long table with 2 staffers, a young woman with a tablet and an older man in a rumpled suit. They stood when I entered. "Helen," Michael said, smiling, "thanks for coming." "Of course." He gestured to a chair. "This is Rachel and James, yes, named after my father. They're managing the foundation project." I shook their hands. Rachel started. "Mrs. Brennan, we've reviewed your employment history with Undersecretary Harrison. It's impressive. We're looking for someone who can help us curate his personal archives, conduct interviews with former colleagues, and provide context for his policy work." "I can do that," I said. James leaned forward. "This is part-time, maybe 10 hours a week. We can work around your schedule." "That's perfect." Michael watched me carefully. "Helen, I want to be transparent. Natalie expressed concern that this might be too much for you. She said you have health issues." I smiled faintly. "Natalie worries. I'm fine." "Good," he said. "Then let's move forward." We talked for an hour. They asked about James's early career, his relationships with other diplomats, his philosophy on public service. I answered clearly, precisely, pulling memories from decades ago like files from a cabinet. When we finished, Rachel looked at Michael. "She's perfect." Michael nodded. "Helen, the position is yours if you want it." "I do." He smiled. "Then welcome aboard." I left the building lighter than I'd felt in years. When I got home, Natalie's car was in the driveway. I walked into the main house through the front door, something I hadn't done in 6 years. Natalie was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, face tight. "We need to talk," she said. "I heard you took the job." "I did." She set down the knife. "Helen, I asked you not to." "You threatened me," I corrected. "That's different." Her jaw clenched. "This is going to complicate my work." "Then maybe you should have treated me with respect from the beginning." She stared at me. "What's that supposed to mean?" It means I'm not invisible anymore, Natalie, and you can't make me disappear just because it's convenient. Her face went pale. You think I was trying to— Yes, I said calmly. I do. But that's over now. I turned to leave. Helen! I stopped. She was gripping the counter, knuckles white. If you make me look bad in front of Harrison, I'll make your life hell. I looked at her. You already did, Natalie, and I survived. I walked out. For the next month, I worked quietly. I went to the foundation office twice a week, reviewed documents, answered questions. Michael treated me with respect. His staff did too. I wasn't invisible. I was needed. At home, things shifted. Natalie stopped talking to me. David asked what happened, but I just said, "We had a disagreement. It'll pass." Emma, though, noticed. One evening, she knocked on my apartment door. "Grandma, are you okay?" I smiled. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Mom's mad at you." "I know." "Why?" I hesitated. Sometimes adults forget that everyone deserves respect.
Even grandmas. Emma frowned. "That's stupid." I laughed. "Yes, it is." She hugged me. I held her, feeling the weight of something I'd almost lost. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from Michael's office. "Helen, we need to talk. Can you come in?" I drove to the Russell building, heart pounding. Michael was waiting in his office, face grave. "Helen, sit down." I sat. He slid a folder across the desk. "Natalie submitted a formal complaint. She's claiming you're interfering with her work, that you're using your position to undermine her credibility." I stared at the folder. "That's not true." "I know," he said, "but she's my chief of staff. I can't ignore it." I felt the ground shift beneath me. "What are you saying?" He sighed. "I'm saying I need to figure out how to handle this without losing either of you." I nodded slowly. "I see. Helen, you're not the problem, but Natalie's good at her job, and she's insistent." I stood. "Senator, I've spent 6 years being erased. I won't go back to that, even for you." I walked out. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the ceiling. I thought about calling Tom, about quitting, about packing my things and leaving before Natalie forced me out. But then I remembered something James Harrison once told me. "The people who stay quiet aren't weak, Helen. They're strategic, because when they finally speak, everyone listens." I picked up the phone. "Rachel, it's Helen. I need to schedule a meeting with the senator, and I need Natalie there too." The meeting was set for the following Tuesday. Conference room, 3 p.m. Michael, Natalie, Rachel, James, and me. When I walked in, Natalie was already seated, arms crossed, face cold. Michael sat at the head of the table, looking tired. "Helen," he said, "thanks for coming." I sat across from Natalie. Silence. Michael cleared his throat. "We're here to resolve this. Natalie, you've expressed concerns about Helen's role. Helen, you've made it clear you're not stepping down. Let's talk." Natalie spoke first, voice sharp. "Senator, with respect, Helen is a distraction. She has no formal training in archival work, no understanding of modern political operations. Her presence creates confusion and undermines my authority." I waited. Michael looked at me. "Helen?" I opened my folder, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and slid it across the table. "This is a memo James Harrison wrote in 1985. It's about trust in leadership." Natalie glanced at it, frowning. Michael picked it up, read it, then went still. The memo was addressed to his father's senior staff. It outlined principles for building credibility: transparency, respect, humility. At the bottom, James had handwritten a note. "Helen, this is the standard. Don't let anyone convince you it's outdated. J.H." Michael looked at me. "Where did you find this?" "In your father's files. I kept a copy. He gave it to me the day I left the State Department." I looked at Natalie. "Your complaint says I don't understand modern political operations. You're right. I don't understand using people and throwing them away when they're inconvenient.
I don't understand erasing someone's history because it makes you uncomfortable. If that's modern politics, I don't want to understand it." Natalie's face went red. "That's not—" "Let her finish," Michael said quietly. I continued. "For 6 years, I lived in your backyard. I helped raise your daughter. I kept quiet while you talked around me, through me, like I didn't exist. I accepted it because I thought that's what family does, sacrifices. But then I remembered something. I used to be someone.
I used to have value. And just because I'm old doesn't mean that value disappeared. It just means people stopped looking." The room was silent. Michael set the memo down. "Natalie, I need to ask you something. Did you know Helen worked for my father?" Natalie hesitated. "Not in detail. Did you ask?" She didn't answer. Michael leaned back. "I hired you because you're competent, but competence without respect is just ambition, and I won't tolerate it." Natalie's voice cracked. "Senator!" "Helen stays," he said. "She's a consultant on this project, and her role is non-negotiable. If that's a problem, we can discuss your future here, but I won't ask her to leave." Natalie stared at him, then at me. Her eyes were wet, furious, broken. She stood. "I need to think." She left. The door closed. Michael exhaled. "Helen, I'm sorry." I shook my head. "Don't be. This needed to happen." He smiled faintly. "You're a lot like my father, stubborn. He taught me well." I drove home slowly, hands steady on the wheel. When I pulled into the driveway, David was waiting on the porch. "Mom, what happened? Natalie won't talk to me." I got out of the car. "She'll tell you when she's ready. She's talking about moving, says she can't work with Harrison anymore." I nodded. "That's her choice." David looked lost. "Mom, I don't understand. What did you do?" I stopped. "I stopped being invisible, David. That's all." I walked to the garage apartment, unlocked the door, and went inside. The space felt different now. Not smaller, just mine. A week later, Natalie resigned. She took a job with a lobbying firm in Virginia, moved out with Emma. David stayed. He apologized, cried, said he never meant to let her treat me that way. I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I wanted to. Michael kept me on the foundation project. We worked together for 2 years, built something beautiful in James's memory, and I learned something important. Being old doesn't mean being powerless. It just means you survived long enough to know which battles matter. And sometimes the quietest fight is the one worth having. I still live in the garage apartment, still make casseroles, still babysit Emma when she visits. But now, when people ask what I do, I don't say nothing. I say, I remember, because memory, I've learned, is the one thing they can never take away. If this story resonated with you, please don't hesitate to like this video. Join the family by subscribing to this channel so we can share more with each other. Please leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from.